Today in math, you're going to be looking at some more word problems. As we get closer to third grade, our word problems are getting trickier and trickier. So it's really important that we are taking our time to make a plan to solve the problems. You might remember in the beginning of the year, we talked about how there are two different kinds of equations. There's a situation equation, which is an equation that you write that matches what's happening in the word problem. There's also a solution equation, which is an equation you write that helps you solve a word problem. Let's take a look at some examples of situation equations and solution equations and see the steps we should be following to solve word problems today. There we go. Okay. So here's the first problem we're going to solve together. Jim and Nancy collect postcards. They just added 37 postcards to their collection. Now they have 98 postcards. How many postcards did they have to begin with? The first thing that you should be thinking about is what's happening in the story, and you should be trying to make a picture in your mind. So maybe you see a picture of Jim and Nancy with all of their postcards. Maybe you're visualizing them adding more postcards. Maybe they're pasting them into a book or putting them into a box. And you might also see a picture of how many postcards they have now in their collection. So make sure that you're stopping to visualize what's happening in the problem. Then we want to think about writing a solution equation. So let's think about what we know in the problem. What are the things we know? Well, we know that Jim and Nancy added 37 postcards to their collection. So we know their collection of postcards is changing because they're adding more postcards. We also know that now they have 98 postcards in their collection. That's another thing that we know that's going to be important. We also know as good mathematicians, we need to make sure we pay attention to what the question is asking us. And we can find the question by looking for the question mark and the first letter of a question word. So the question word here is how. So let's see what they're asking us in the question. They're asking about the postcards that Jim and Nancy had to begin with. When I say begin with, it makes me think I need to go back to the beginning of the problem and see if they told me how many they started with, how many postcards they had at first. I'm looking at the beginning of this problem and I see that all it tells me is Jim and Nancy collect postcards. So I don't know how many postcards Jim and Nancy had to begin with. So that is going to be the unknown or the thing that I don't know that I want to find out today. So now it's time to write a situation equation that would match this problem. Let's think about it. We know that Jim and Nancy collect postcards and they start out with some amount in their collection. We don't know how much they have at first, but we know that they start out with something. Then they add 37 postcards to their collection. Now they have 98 postcards. And the question is asking us how many postcards did they have to begin with, which we've shown with our empty box at the start of the equation to show that we don't know what they started with. Remember, a situation equation is an equation that matches what's happening in the word problem. Let's reread the problem to double check our situation equation. The problem says that Jim and Nancy collect postcards, and we also know that we are solving for how many they had to begin with. So my first thing in my equation is postcards to begin with, the thing that we don't know. Then 37 postcards are added to the collection, and now there are 98 postcards. So the equation we wrote does match what's happening in the word problem. It's a situation equation. Once we've made sure our situation equation matches the word problem, then we can think about making a plan to solve. You might want to write a solution equation to help you solve the word problem. So when I look at our situation equation, I'm thinking first about how I might make a plan to solve. And I can make a plan to solve by turning that equation into a math mountain. I know 98 postcards is what Jim and Nancy have now. That's their total amount of postcards. So that's going to be the number at the top of my mountain. I also know that one of the partners is going to be 37 because I know they have 37 postcards. Our other unknown, the postcards that they started with, will be the other partner. Looking at this math mountain, there are two different solution equations I might choose to use to solve. I might decide I want to subtract, starting with the total, 98, and subtract 37 to find the unknown. Or I might decide that I want to solve for the missing addend by adding on and use the solution equation 37 plus something equals 98. And for that, I could use one of my adding on strategies like an open number line. Let's review the steps that we took to solve the word problems today. This word problem today. I want you to pay attention to how many steps I'm taking before I start to solve. First, I read and visualized the story. Then I wrote a situation equation that matched. Next, I checked my equation by rereading the story to myself. After that, I made a plan. I decided how I was going to solve for the unknown. And finally, I was able to solve the problem. I took 4 steps before I started to solve to make sure that I had a plan that was going to get me to the right answer. Let's review those steps one more time. First, I want you to read and visualize the story by making a picture of what's happening in your mind. Then, I want you to write a situation equation that matches what's happening in the story. After that, I want you to check your equation by rereading the story to yourself and making sure it matches what's happening in the story. Then you'd be ready to make a plan and decide how you want to solve for the unknown. Your last step then will be to solve and get your answer. If you're feeling confident with these steps, you might be feeling ready to try your independent work today. If you want to watch one more example, then keep watching this video because I'm going to go over one more example using these steps to solve word problems. Let's do another one together. Here's the problem.